Oh no, not again. And again and again. What's going on with these glitches? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please do not panic. I repeat, please do not panic. I'll do my very best to get this show running. In the meantime, theme song, please.
In this series, we've already discussed the adventures of Colonel Clifton, who behaves very British. Today we want to look at a new series in the Circle of Comics about a whole group of people who are also very British. But just like with Colonel Clifton, there is a special twist here. The comic series was not written and drawn by English people. It was not even produced in England. It came from Italy. And the original title is Gli Aristocratici, the Aristocrats. The Aristocrats was created by Alfredo Castelli and Ferdinando Tacconi in 1973, published in Corriere dei Ragazzi and reprinted several times in Italy and abroad. The Corriere dei Ragazzi, later Courier Boy, was a comics and news magazine published in Italy from 1972 to 1984. It was meant to be a successor of the Corriere dei Piccoli, a children's magazine published by the newspaper Corriere della Sera. The Corriere dei Ragazzi published established comic authors such as Hugo Pratt, Dino Battaglia and Sergio Toppi, among the best artists of the periods, as well as writers such as Mino Milani and debutants such as Bonvi, Silva and Milo Manara. Now, these are all Italian artists and maybe you are not familiar with their work, but we will get to know two of them today. Alfredo Giuseppe Castelli was born in 1947 and died this year in February 2024. He was a cartoonist, a literary critic, and a historian of comics and popular literature. Now we are talking about the Aristocrats in this episode, but Castelli's most successful work was Martin Mystère, Detective of the Impossible, which is still published until today. During his career, he invented numerous comics and stories, and in a wide range. We're speaking from horror, real horror, to parody. He was a very busy author, to whom several biographies have been dedicated and who also received several awards. If I were to simply read out the titles of all his works here, I could probably extend the duration of this episode considerably. But every work deserves consideration, so I don't want to just list them here. Instead, I would like to bow to this artist and his work and express my admiration. Alfredo Castelli died in February after a long illness. Ferdinando Tacconi, born in 1922, died in 2006. He drew comics based partly on his own ideas and texts, but also worked with various authors such as Alfredo Castelli. Various biographies are also dedicated to him, and he received a posthumous award for his work in the field of cinema. The Aristocrats was created by Alfredo Castelli, and Ferdinando Tacconi gave them their distinct looks. It debuted in 1973 in the Corriere dei Ragazzi. The first episode was aptly named In Service of Her Majesty. The series became an instant success in Italy and in other countries, for example in Germany, where they were renamed Gentleman GmbH, which translates to Gentleman Limited Company. Castelli had the first idea for the series in 1970. He wanted to make a comic about a gang of gentleman crooks, some of whom were former criminals who would now use their criminal talents to hunt other criminals or at least steal their loot. In the course of the series, the Aristocrats would meet other famous fictional characters, such as the master thief Arsène Lupin, Sherlock Holmes, Inspector Clouseau, or even James Bond. In other words, long before the so-called League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the Aristocrats brought different literary material together in one universe. The Aristocrats use different gadgets for their missions and always have an ace up their sleeve. The character's appearance was based on real, living people. But who are these characters anyway? The leader of the group is the Count. On the left side, a British gentleman with refined manners. Fritz, upper on the right side, is a German inventor, author of all escape plans and gadgets. Moose, here on the lower right side, no, he's not a Canadian, he's an Irish giant who loves beer and, well, fist fights. Alvaro, lower left side, is an Italian playboy and he's picking any lock and opening any safe in a short amount of time. Jean, in the upper row in the middle, is the Count's niece. And well, these are the 1970s and she's there to seduce and distract and stuff. Yeah. And then there's Inspector Michael Allen. He's an inspector of Scotland Yard and he knows that the Aristocrats are some sort of criminals, but he also knows that they are helping the police with their work. He always seeks advice and help from the Aristocrats when he has a criminal case that he himself does not know how to solve. The inspector will later become the protagonist of his own series, called Inspector Allen. And our first story of the Aristocrats begins with him. He doesn't know what to do and seeks the Count's help. His problem is this: the British Museum has once again acquired looted art. Yes, that's what Brits do. In this case, it's an Aztec statue worth £100,000. Unfortunately, the statue was stolen on the way to the museum, but not in a conventional way. It was replaced with a clever fake. Alan also knows where the real statue ended up. It is in the house of a foreign diplomat. Scotland Yard cannot proceed with this without triggering an international incident. But the Aristocrats could steal the statue back and everything would be fine again. The Aristocrats then demonstrate their talent straight away when Alvaro and Moose work together to open Inspector Allen's briefcase, the lock of which is jammed. The inspector provides them with a plan of the diplomat's apartment and lets them do as they please. Fritz goes to the National Gallery and uses a camera hidden in his glasses to take several pictures of the fake statue so that the Aristocrats can create a second fake. Using sophisticated equipment, they then plan to break into the diplomat's house and swap the real statue for their fake. Jean creates a distraction. The plan is planned down to the second and must be carried out precisely. The story on Her Majesty's service has all the elements that characterize the Aristocrats. A not entirely legal mission to harm another criminal, gadgets that are far too advanced for the time, a complicated plan, and all the characters are always prepared for every situation. That was the fun of the comics back then, seeing how the villains try to get at the Aristocrats and fail miserably every time. Every time? Every time? When did I pick up this well, whether the gadgets would actually work was irrelevant. It didn't matter whether they would have been technically possible at the time or not. The camera that Fritz hides in his glasses didn't exist back then because the lenses would have been far too big. The devices that the aristocrats used to get from a building on one side of the street to a building on the other side would have been technically possible, but I don't know whether they would really have worked that way. But whatever! The story is great fun, but unfortunately too short. But it makes you want more. As for Ferdinando Tacconi's drawing style, you'll notice that he has the somewhat unusual habit of having his characters often look towards the fourth wall when they are talking, making them look directly at the reader. The image we are currently seeing is an example, but not quite so unusual. Alvaro is looking directly at the reader while he's talking to the Count, but the Count could be right where we can see him. It becomes clearer when there are several characters in the panel talking to each other, like here for example. Here, Alvaro and the Count are talking, but instead of looking at each other, Alvaro has his back to the Count and is facing the fourth wall. Another example is the image here with Alvaro and Fritz. Fritz is talking directly to Alvaro here, but his eyes are on the reader. I would have to look at other works by Tacconi to see if this is something he just does or if this is something unique to the Aristocrats comic series. In summary, I can say that the series was great fun for me. We can also see here that the comics were produced in high quality, even though the Corriere dei ragazzi, literally translated newspaper for boys, was aimed at children and young people. It was a good start for the series and the success was to continue. But this is another story and will be told another time. Strange things are going on here. I have to look into it. But for now, this doesn't have to bother you. So if you like this episode, then give a like and subscribe to the channel. It would be really helpful. And until next time, take good care of yourself and see you. I've got work to do. So out now.